Then at continental level for extension, we have the Africa Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services. And for the extension, they don't have a separate sub-regional structure. They go straight to the countries. This structuring is important in Africa because we have very many countries, 55, 56, and the research systems are not very strong. So having a coordination body at regional level is very important. It helps to have mechanisms for pooling capacity, for pooling infrastructure, for pooling resources that serve the entire region. And these regional organizations are not involved in actual research. They are mostly engaged in coordination of what goes on at the country level, and also in brokering partnerships, in advocacy, knowledge exchange, knowledge management and exchange, and that kind of work. We also are involved in formulating at continental level, continental initiatives. I think we've been discussing and talking about the fertilizer and soil health initiative. This is a result of a strong work stream at continental level, led by Faraba, with input from all the other levels. When those continental initiatives are finally financed and are ready for implementation, the continental body and the sub-regional bodies are responsible for coordinating the implementation at country level. So that is important. Explaining the structure is important for the main point that I'll make at the end. To respond to your question on how do we engage with civil society. First, civil society, I think, is a very broad term with very many constituents within the civil society space. And over the years, I think the last 2 decades, we have seen a shift in the way research is conducted. Initially, research will be carried out, and then extension, and then engagement of the end users. That was quite a linear way of doing things. And it emerged that if you do research very well and the other players are not on board or they are not engaged, the impact is undermined. So we have seen a shift from a linear approach to a more networked approach where research is embedded within a broader system of innovation, a system of innovation that involves the end users, the farmers, the private sector. Extension, of course, has always been part of it, the policy shapers and policy makers. And that really covers the civil society space. So in terms of engagement, the shift has been there, that civil society is very much part of the research process presently. Within the civil society, the president of TechnoSouth mentioned that the private sector has not been sufficiently engaged, and that has been a weakness. When we follow the innovation process, the private sector is extremely important. And we've had examples of successes where the successes are largely attributed to the critical role that the private sector does. So we see private sector engaged at the very local level. And the constituents of the civil society tend to be engaged at that level. As you go further up, levels of aggregation, national, regional, and sub-regional. The engagement with organizations or constituencies that are better organized at those levels. Example is farmers. We have farmer structures all the way to continental and global. It is much easier to engage with them. The youth are also organized in that way. The critical players like private sector, you don't find a regional private sector body that you can work with to get the private sector perspective. So we rely on the private sector players either at local level or the ones that operate at different levels but do not speak for the entire private sector. So the challenge then is to engage those civil society bodies that are not as well organized at higher levels. And the other point I would like put across is that engagement depends on how the constituents are organized. I also want to make the point that our engagement with the civil society is actually a partnership. It's a partnership where we rely on civil society to bring perspectives that make the research relevant, and also to bring in, speak for us, speak for research. If the civil society is pushing for, say, increased investment in research, those who fund research are perhaps going to consider that than when we speak for ourselves. So that's the part of the partnership. And on the other hand, civil society that's engaged in advocacy would rely on research to provide the evidence, the knowledge for that. So it's a partnership that we continually learn how to work better and how to find ways of being effective within that partnership. More recently, we have found that engaging private sector actors that have scale would be a more effective way of engaging the private sector. Making sure that people like off-takers, aggregators are involved right from the beginning is much more effective than just relying on the small private sector at local level. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Our next panelist is Professor Apollinaire Jeku. And the question for you, and again, it'd be great to have you explain the role your organization plays, but I'm going to ask you in particular about livestock farming. The crucial role it plays in African communities is known to everyone here. How can climate-smart practices be integrated into livestock-based systems to enhance resilience and sustainability while addressing the challenges posed by climate change? And additionally, if you can, how can research and innovation in the livestock sector contribute to improving the livelihoods of smallholder farmers and pastoralists in the face of climate change?
Thank you very much. I want to thank AGRA for inviting us. When I say us, it's really the International Livestock Research Institute and also the CGIAR to bring livestock to the table. I think that's really what I'm going to address here. But as a segue from the previous conversation, Jos from the African Food Fellowship posed a question in the previous session that we're talking about the food systems. The complexity of private sector leadership, how do we build leadership around that? So that was a very important proposition or question on the table. We didn't have sufficient time to address that. Let me just say that the leadership there, you can define it in multiple ways, but I think we're also very clear that good leadership is really important to take us to where we want to go. we see it as investing in people and also in organizations and making sure that there are people within organizations that are leading some segments of this. And then, with that, the partnership and all the things that we've talked about is important. But I think bringing that to the table is important because we can talk about how much investment we want to get, but always forget that we need people to actually do the work. So my remarks here will follow 4 different points. One is really very welcome to talk about the organizations that we come from. The International Livestock Research Institute is really a global research organization headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya, and also Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And we have locations in other 14 places in the world, in Africa and Southeast Asia. We are focusing on transforming livestock or making livestock work for small-scale producers. We say better lives through livestock, so I think that's really what we can say about that. And I'll say a little bit about the work that we do, looking at it from the lens of climate change. And ILRI is also part of the CGIAR, a global research network, probably the largest in the world, looking at agricultural innovations in the global south, a little over 50 years old. So I think we have a global footprint from the Americas through to Africa and also Asia. We cover a whole range of commodities in agriculture. So I think that's one of the things that I want to share. How are we looking at the future from the CGIAR and ILRI and other organizations within that? I also want to mention that in the previous panel, my colleague Juan Luca Restrepo, who is the Director General of the Alliance for Biodiversity and CIAT, is part of that fabric. He touched on some of the things that the CGIAR is doing. So within the CGIAR, we are looking at Horizon 2030, focusing on 3 different things that we would like to do, in terms of the science areas that we have put on the table, where our innovation, partnership, engagement, and impact should be looked at. The genetic innovation is really an important component of the things that we would like to do. I'll come to some of the signs that we see telling us that climate change is actually an imperative. It's really urgent that we do something about it. How do we develop new breeds of animals? How do we generate new varieties that are going to capture the short rains or no rains that we have, the increasing temperature, the new diseases that are emerging and things like that? That's really the genetic, some of the things that our genetic innovation science areas is telling us to do. We also have the system transformation, really looking at the whole system. It's redundant, but really looking at the whole system, the policies, the engagement, the institutions, and the evidence that we need to put on the table, and who should have access to that evidence. That's really the system innovation, system transformation science area. The third one is resilient agri-food system. I have the honor to lead that on an interim basis within the CGIAR. It's really looking at how we can put some of these innovations, not just looking at one commodity, but looking at the whole system, making sure that our science is really looking at the farming systems, what are the commodities that you see at the farms and stuff like that. So in a different setting, I can tell you a bit more about the work that we do. That's one dimension of selling the work that we do in the CGIAR. The second dimension, really helping us to connect to the Sustainable Development Goals, are in 5 different impact areas. One is really around gender. We just had a gender session. Nicolene, who is the platform director, is here. Whatever we do, we have to look at it from the gender lens to ensure that no one is left behind. The farming communities we can maximize and through inclusivity and stuff like that. The second one is really the climate change platform. So it's a currency, climate is a currency that is new to us. How do we trade using that? We have to be sure that we can have always a climate lens in the things that we do. We're not going to change necessarily the science that we do, but we can put it in the climate change context. The third platform is really around nutrition. It's one thing to do all the work that we are trying to do, but how do we get quality and quantity food on the table in a safe manner? I think that's one of the things that we like to do. And the third one is, all this is about job creation. In the previous panel, we had one young person talking about, the youth is there. We have to create incentive through the jobs and stuff like that. And the fifth one is around biodiversity. We are talking about climate change. We're losing some of the varieties and commodities that we used to have in the past. At that rate, are we still going to have the biodiversity that's required to respond to the climate change? I think that's an important thing. So that's a second dimension of selling the work that we do in the CGIAR. So the second point I want to talk about is, when we talk about climate change, what do we see? The diagnosis has so many points, shorter rains, increased temperature, or no rain at all, animals dying because of new diseases and stuff like that. So that's really one of the things that we want to be clear that we understand very clearly. We understand very well. And as I mentioned, the impact or the immediate effect of climate change is really, we are losing some of the commodities that we used to have. So I think that's the second point that I wanted to talk about, that we should be very clear. What is it that is the result of climate change, so that we can see in various places. We don't need to convince anybody. We can point at things or issues in your environment as the results of climate change. I'm going a long way to say that, because understanding very well those consequences and parameters of climate change really then help us to see the solution that we need to bring. And the solutions have to come now. If I take some varieties of maize or wheat or whatever, that needed 3 or 4 months, to go from planting to harvesting. But with shorter rains, we need varieties that can produce in a very short time frame. So the same thing, some breeds of cattle that could survive in some areas and give you milk, but now with the increasing temperature, we see that when the temperature goes up, that shock leads to low milk production. And we've seen that in a country like Tanzania here. How can we come up with new breeds or resilient breeds that will continue to thrive in high temperature, but wouldn't drop in milk production, because this is where we're losing. And there are many things that we can talk about. The third thing is, how do we see our work as the International Livestock Research Institute? Really, we're very happy to be participating in this COP. Me personally, is because we can finally put livestock on the agenda and discuss. Because previously, agriculture in Africa was just crops. But now we are looking at animal agriculture as an important component. I wouldn't get into the debate about livestock is bad for the environment. We know through the numbers here that livestock is an important thing. If you were to take livestock out of the equation, millions of people will immediately go into poverty. So the opportunity that we have is, how can we turn livestock into a solution? How can we really make livestock actually work for the farming communities? And we look at livestock from, it's not just a homogeneous thing in Africa. We are producing livestock in various places. What are those places where livestock is produced? The more we understand those production systems, the better we can develop solutions or intervention that will support farmers address the challenges that we face there. One production system is really the mixed crop livestock systems, where we are growing the crops, we're having fodder and things like that to help feed the animals that are in the production system. What are the challenges within that? I think we can tell you a lot more in a different setting. We also have the semi-intensive or intensive production system, where farmers are already operating like viable businesses. How can we continue to support? And there you need to have the right breed, you have to have availability of feed, some diseases and stuff like that. The third production system is actually the one that is always very well neglected, the pastoral systems. In some countries, you hold more than 70% of your animal asset in those production systems, and they're the most vulnerable. I think we have to tailor some of our solutions and interventions to be focusing on that, where you can provide resilient animals, restore degraded lands and things like that. I think in a different setting we can talk about that. But finally, our work is really focusing on how can we ensure that animals are healthy, they're interacting well with the environment, we have the right genetics at the right places, and then we can feed animals with available feed resources in our communities. Let me leave it here. Somebody is touching at the word. So I always get excited when I'm talking about design. Thank you so much.
I would would never have tried to stop you. It was all very interesting. So our final panelist is the perfect person to build on both of the presentations that have already been made. It's Kleber Lima Gurane. I got it right the first time. And he's the president of the International Center for Innovation and Transfer of Agriculture, Livestock, and Environmental Technology, which he will explain their role to all of us. But I think the question is really obvious to you. How can the exchange of innovative agriculture and environmental technologies contribute to building to climate resilience and promoting sustainable farming practices, especially across diverse agricultural landscapes in Africa? You can take that question after you tell us about your mission and the focus of your work.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon for everyone. First of all, just to explain my organization, just to understand the context what I will talk about. So I'm part of FDV. FDV, it's a think tank, a Brazilian think tank, created in 1945. And we are the number 3 in the world and the number 1 in the agriculture and livestock for tropical climate. FDV and Brazilian government created an institution center some years ago to promote technology transfer from Brazil to other countries. Basically, we bring together to our institution, CITA, the main Brazilian private and public institutions that hold know-how for this proposal. So since then, we have promoted this technology transfer. We have worked in Latin America, in Africa continent, and Asia. Basically, in Africa, we have worked with Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Senegal, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria, and Nigeria especially. We have created a big project together with the government there, named the Green Imperative Project. If you go to the Google, we can take a lot of information about that project. And we have implemented another project in 3 different states in Nigeria using the regenerative agriculture. Basically, our concern is very pragmatic way. We know that the life of a farmer in any part of the world is not easy. I'm a farmer in Brazil. Usually, I use this enough close, but it's not easy, especially in Africa. Africa, you have, I can imagine, I know several smallholder farmers in Africa faces several difficulty, lack of finance, lack of inputs, lack of technical assistance. There is a lot of ideas, but in fact, it's not easy to work on the field to produce food in Africa. But our main concern is very pragmatic way. In this project with regenerative agriculture, when you are involved with 76,000 smallholder farmers in 3 different states in Nigeria, our main concern is to increase the yield, increase the quality of the products, and decrease the cost production. This is essential because usually the farmer, when produce products in Africa, needed to compete with the import products. So you needed to produce a good quality, good production, good yield, good productivity, and good cost production to face the imported products. Because when you go to the market to sell your products, you are facing the real world. You needed to sell your product to make profit. So you needed to have a technical assistance to do that. So we have, in terms of inputs, we have worked for seed production. We have in Brazil several kind of seeds, hybrid seeds, not GMO, hybrid seeds, and we are working in Africa to replicate this in the continent. For us, it's impossible a country have a very good agricultural development without seed production, without having local seed production. It's essential. Improve the quality of the seeds, they improve the germination, improve, including not only maize, soybean, but other kind of seeds. In particular, right now, we have a very interesting variety of wheat for tropical climate. No, Brazil in 3 years, the next 2 years, we will start to export wheat because we part of a research made some years ago. Right now we have 5 varieties different of wheat to produce in this kind of climate, no, tropical climate. It's, I have received some demands from countries in Africa. Particularly, we are in Egypt in a big project there to produce 1 million hectares of wheat because Egypt has imported wheat a lot from Ukraine after war, faces a problem. And other countries like Cameroon would like to produce wheat too. So this is some example that we are doing to support the smallholder farmers in Africa. So another important things to reduce the cost production is bioinputs, no? Biopesticide, biofertilizer is a new trend in the world. Basically, I have seen in Brazil and Latin America in general, even Argentina, Paraguay, this kind of products increasing because you have a very good quality products. It's a natural, good for the environmental, but at the same time, the cost production, you could reduce a lot the cost production. Usually, you pay 50% less compared with the conventional fertilizer and pesticides. We know that after the Ukraine war, many countries has a problem like this. Even Brazil, that has imported 90% of the total fertilizer that the country use. So biofertilizer, pesticides is a very interesting solution. This month, we are start up a production plan in Nigeria to support this kind of the project that I mentioned to you. So another is a technical assistant capacity building. We have make a very comprehensive capacity building in the smallholder farmers. Our technicians go to the field and live together with smallholder farmers. So we have another things to share with you, but we don't have much time. But we are available to contact or to receive any contact from you if you would like to know more about our organization on direct with the website too. Thank you very much.
We started a little bit late, and I know lunch is about to begin, but I'm sure that you'd be willing to take questions. And so do we have 2 or 3? Yes, ma'am. And then you can go next.
Thank you. I'll be quick. My name is Mary Karanu from the Right to Food Coalition in Kenya. These are great submissions about the role of research, and thank you to the FARA president on highlighting the collaboration between civil society and research. Also, you highlighted the importance of institutionalizing some of the things that we are talking about, you know, what has been proven to work, being translated into policy and institutionalized so that we safeguard some of the gains that we are making in food systems. So what I think and was missing in this session is I think civil society's greatest role is to demand for the implementation and accountability and service delivery from governments. William in the first session talked about private sector remains in the ecosystems after our projects wind up. But I also say governments remain in the ecosystems, and they have that obligation to ensure that food is accessible and farmers are supported in different ways. So that is what we are doing in Kenya with the Right to Food Coalition, and also my colleagues in Malawi also demanding for accountability, demanding for service delivery on what we have passed as policies. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. If anyone wants to react, you're welcome to, but otherwise I think it was a good contribution to the room. Yes, sir, and then you'll be next. Okay, you've got it. Why not?
Yeah, thank you very much for this session. My name is Lucy from Nigeria, and one concern I've always had as a youth is the disconnect between research and agribusiness. So for a lot of youth, we don't we're not able to find this balance as to why research is extremely important for agribusiness growth. And I would like to know what your organization are doing as regards that, bridging that gap to help you to understand the value of research in agribusiness. Secondly is, what are your organizations doing to ensure that this research, the information from this research is accessible virtually to everybody, including youth, because we now live in a generation where youth are most accessible online than in physical locations. Thank you.
Very good question. Please, maybe more than one of you might want to respond. Please, Apollinaire.
Let me start. Thank you so much for the question. Let me point back to you. There's the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Nigeria. They have set up a youth incubation, agribusiness incubation in Ibadan. So I think this is something that you can visit. But I think those relationships are critical for some of those, for some of the research and innovation to actually be commercialized and scale up. So we think about that. It's not always easy to do, because I think engaging with the private sector is not something that you can do and say, okay, it works here and then it's going to work the same way in other places. But there are real examples, including in your own country, that you can visit and see what's a working model there. Thank you for your question.
Kleber, did you have something you wanted to add?
It's not working. No, in fact, I understand very well, and your concern. One part of our mission is to increase the relationship. We created a partnership with another institutions in country, as your institutions. No, I think that's. I'm talking about what's happened in Brazil, and just to give you a concrete example. 6 years ago, we imported a lot of food. We received food from USAID, from USA. Can you imagine this? Because we don't have enough production for our people at this time. But after that, using the research, using the knowledge, a lot of research, a lot of knowledge, we started the revolution, and right now we are exporting for several countries in the world, produce for our people and export several kind of food. So basically because of research. No? Just to remind you, soya bean, it's at this time it was produced only in USA, only in Argentina, only in countries, different countries, or with different, not tropical climate countries, no? But through the research, we can produce in our land, the soybean, corn, and other kind of products, through the research. Research is the main part of activity if you understand to increase your agriculture. We are available. We have a very close to our new government, and of course we are the Minister of Agriculture, and is part of that efforts. And if you would like to share information, it would be a pleasure with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take 2 more questions, and then I'm sure, or maybe 3. But then I'm sure you could also ask the panelists as you go to lunch directly questions. You, sir, and then you're going to be next after him. No, you're next. He's going to ask, okay. And then you. And then we'll.
Thank you very much.
Maybe ask somebody who hasn't asked yet. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Jacob Mignona. My question goes to the Forum for Agriculture Research in Africa, FARA, the institutions at which is the apex for agricultural research in our continent. How is it going in terms of the various sub-regional organizations? For instance, if you take the CORAF or the ASARECA, so and all are at different level of play. So how strong are they for the past 10 years? And to that, so how is civil societies contribute to the defining of the agenda of the FARA? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacob, for that. And yeah, I wanted to respond to earlier questions as well. But specifically to how the structure is with regard to the sub-regional organizations. They went through a dip. They were and are still very dependent on external development partners. And when they changed their priorities, those organizations suffered. It was an important lesson that we need these African organizations to have ownership and to be supported by the governments, by sources that are on the continent. And that's the shift that these organizations are all making. It's a gradual transition. We are still dependent on the external funders, but we're making a lot of effort, and we are seeing a lot of response from the governments to own these organizations and support them. A quick one to private sector and youth involvement. We are making that shift. There's a lot now. There's an appreciation that research cannot be impactful if it leaves out key players, farmers and private sector. Thank you.
Great. I have overpromised the number of questions we can take. We'll take the last question. We don't own the room, and I think it's time for us to turn it over. So we'll take one last question, and then I'll encourage you to perhaps approach the panelists directly as we vacate the room. You, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Boubacar Kijoji from WWF. So thank you very much for a thought presentation here regarding research and food systems. But my question to you people who have been working on research, we recognize that there have been more research or products that are coming from research organizations, like very good varieties, very good technologies. But we have seen the adoption rate doesn't really match with those research informational products or technologies you are innovating. So what the reason for that, and what should we do to increase adoption of the technologies that are coming from research institutions? And an example, if you look the product from the public research, which we call the public goods, they are not really coming to farmers in terms of the adoption. What should we do to make sure that adoption has been improved, so that we realize a true food transformation in Africa?
Right. Thank you. So a very good question for any of you, increasing the rate of adoption of innovations.
Yeah, I could just I echo that. I think about 10 years ago, there was a study looking at new varieties, crop varieties generated in Africa. The best was 30% adoption. So that was really a wake-up call. I think it's important, several parameters. One is there wasn't a participatory approach. The breeders saying, okay, I'll solve this problem. The farmers were not even interested in those traits. So the participatory approach has helped that. And also trying to look at it from the business side. What problem are you actually going to solve? Is it a big problem and stuff like that? Having a new variety doesn't mean that it's going to be solving our problems. I think that's also one of the things. The corrective action at the moment is many of us, we talk about co-design, co-implementation, really having a farmer-facing or country-facing approach, to understand the problem, working with the real partners to ensure that your solution is not just going to be dormant somewhere. We haven't fixed the problem, but I think the way we are traveling now from our own organization, engaging with partners in the region, is just to address that particular problem, because any good science deliverable is nothing until it's something in the hands of the farmers, I think. And make our research responding to problems, not just something that a scientist is all excited about it and then you do it. So I think your analysis is correct, but I think we are making considerable progress. In fact, even the funders at the moment, they're not just going to single out the best breeder or the best vaccinologist somewhere and say, you do this. You have to demonstrate that you're doing that as a response to a problem and that you're working with the relevant partners to get that working. I want to come back to it. Sometimes the gap is really around adoption, the investment, the private sector investment required to take that up. But I think the way we are thinking at the moment is completely different to ensure that that situation is no longer there, because the speed at which we have to respond is important.
Agre, Kleber, Apollinaire, you were terrific. Can everybody join me in thanking them?
Welcome to the second round with CEO chat. And this round, we're really happy to be joined by John Olanga from Tanzania Private Sector Foundation, the CEO. But then importantly, my immediate left, we have Dick Lukala from Ifakara. And then on my further left, we have none other than Esther Kimani. She's the founder and CEO of Farmer Lifeline Technologies. Karibu sana. To start us up, I'm going to welcome Dick to introduce themselves very briefly, and then I'll go to Esther and John, and then we'll go into the videos. Karibu sana.
Asante. Kwa majina naitwa Dickson Lukala. Ni mkurugenzi wa kampuni ya Dick Lukala. Kampuni iko Ifakara inajishughulisha na kununua mpunga na kuchakata mpunga. Lakini vile vile tunafanya na wakulima walioko kwenye AMCOS na wakulima ambao hawako kwenye AMCOS. Lakini mpaka hivi sasa tumesajili wakulima kwenye mfumo wa ubia soko, tuna wakulima 20,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Asante sana kwa utambulisho. Thank you for that introduction. Then I go next, John.
Thank you. My name is Johnny Ulanga. I work for Tanzania Private Sector Foundation, which is an apex body for private sector in Tanzania. But I also play governance and advisory role in private sector. I chair the board of KCB Bank. I chair the board of Serengeti Breweries. I chair the board of the National Food Reserve Agency and a few others, but I also play advisory role where I've been able to advise a company to grow from $100,000 annual turnover to $1 million annual turnover in a period of about 3 years.
Thank you so much. I'm sure Esther and Dixon are ready, like, we have the advisor right here. Yes, Esther, kindly do introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Esther Kimani. I'm the founder and CEO of Farmer Lifeline Technologies, where we get farmers ahead of crop pests and diseases. We leverage machine learning, artificial intelligence, and computer vision algorithms for the timely detection of pests and diseases, which is done through a simple SMS on the mobile phone, alongside recommendations of affordable and locally available farm chemicals and fertilizers that farmers should apply. Looking forward to learn more.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Please, a round of applause to our members of the panel. And right away, as in the first round, we will see videos showcasing the work by Dixon and work by Esther. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Esther Kimani. I'm the founder and CEO of Farmer Lifeline Technologies, a Kenyan startup that is getting farmers ahead of crop pests and diseases. I drew my inspiration having grown up on the famous slopes of the Aberdare Mountains, doing farming with my family, just like other members of the community. However, I noticed that pests and diseases destroyed most of our yields. And I realized that this was not only a problem facing farmers in my farming community, but also in Kenya, as well as millions in Africa, who lose almost half of their produce due to delayed identification of crop pests and diseases. So this problem has existed for so long since farmers have had to rely on either intuition or scouting their farms, or rather waiting for one of the outnumbered agricultural extension officers to visit their farms for diagnosis. So that's why, having studied a degree in computer science and meeting an able team, we developed the first ever solar-powered crop pest and disease detection device that leverages artificial intelligence, machine learning, for the timely detection of the crop pests and diseases. So once a farmer requests for the device, we visit their farm and permanently mount it on the farm. The device has a camera that scans crops on a radius of 600 meters, and in the event of a pest or a disease, the farmer is notified through a simple SMS on the mobile phone, along with recommendations of what they should apply as a solution. Then all this information is uploaded to our data analytics dashboard for future decision making and policy making. The results that we've seen so far, farmers have been able to increase their yields by over 40% and reduce their losses by over 30%, and earning a decent income from farming. Join us on this journey.
Kwa jina naitwa Dickson Lukala, ni mkurugenzi wa kampuni ya Diki Lukala. Kampuni hii inajihusisha na ununuzi wa zao la mpunga wilaya ya Kilombero, Malinyi, Ulanga na Mlimba. Kampuni hii tumeianzisha 2017, lakini mpaka hivi sasa tunafanya kazi na wakulima 20,000.
Ziko la wakulima kama 5,000, kutoka wakulima 15,000 mpaka leo tuna wakulima 20,000.
Lakini kupitia shirika la Greensight tumeamua kufungua kitu kinachoitwa ubia soko. Kupitia ubia soko tunafanya kazi na Greensight yenyewe Yala na Baraza la Kilimo kwa ajili ya kuwaconnect wakulima kuona soko liko wapi. Kwa hiyo mimi nasimama kama mnunuzi na muuzaji. Kwa hiyo ni mwongoza njia katika soko la zao la mpunga katika wakulima. Hilo kujivunia, manake ni moja ya kupata kipato ambacho sikuwa nacho. Hivi leo manake kama nilikuwa napata gunia 5,000, manake ni nje ya gunia 5,000. Changamoto naweza nikasema zipo sana. Kwa mfano kama leo ninapozungumzia kampuni ya Diki ipo Ifakara, lakini tunafanya kazi nje ya wilaya ya Ifakara. Tunafanya kazi Mlimba, tunafanya kazi Kilombero, tunafanya kazi Ulanga. Sasa changamoto ninayokutana nayo naweza nikasema ni changamoto ya kisera. Kwa sababu unaweza ukakuta agizo la rais linasema kupitisha au kusafirisha zao ni kuanzia ni zaidi ya tani 1 unatakiwa ulipe ushuru. Lakini kwa wilaya zetu hizi imekuwa kama ni command kwamba huwezi kutoa hata gunia 1 linalipiwa ushuru. Kwa hiyo naweza nikasema hiyo ni changamoto. Kwa hiyo unakuta wewe unasaidia wakulima walioko kula ambao wanafanya nao kazi, leo kukufikia ulipo, changamoto inakuwepo ni kwamba ushuru ndio inakuwa ni kigezo cha wewe kufikia. Sababu mkulima anaona, anapiga hesabu ya kwamba kukuletea mpunga kutoka Malinyi au kutoka Ulanga, kuletea wewe anavuka mageti mawili. Na hayo mageti yanamdispense kufanya kile ambacho anaweza kukufikia. Kwa hiyo hiyo ni changamoto. Sasa tunaona hii ni changamoto ya kisera kwa sababu agizo la rais linasema tani 1 kusafirisha, chini ya tani 1 unasafirisha bure. Lakini gunia 2, 3 unalipia ushuru.
All right, asante sana, a round of applause. And sorry if I'll be switching Kiswahili and English. So this is that time when I become a shadow, while I simply listen to Dixon and Esther first narrate your challenges, and then I allow John to advise you on the questions that you have. So first of all, I think in a super summary, you can tell us the challenges that you have. I'll start with Esther, and then I come to Dixon, or whichever way. Naweza nikaanza na wewe kaka Dixon, and then we go to Esther, and then the other way round. And then you want some solution, the advisor is at the middle to advise you. Dixon, karibu.
Asante. Kuhusu changamoto, kama nilivyosema hapo kwenye changamoto kwa kweli zinakuwa ni kubwa, sababu tunafanya kazi nao wakulima. Kwanza sisi tunaanza kuingia nao mkataba kabla ya kuvuna. Tunafanya hivyo kwa maana ya kwamba ili waweze kukopesheke hata kwa mabenki, kwa sababu kama hawana mkataba ni ngumu kukopesheka. Na kazi tulioifanya Ifakara mpaka hivi leo, kuna zaidi ya wakulima 6 wamepata matrekta kupitia udhamini wangu mimi. Sasa hao wakulima wanapokuwa wako nje ya Ifakara na mashamba yako nje ya Ifakara, kukuletea leo mzigo inakuwa shida kwa sababu ya changamoto ya ushuru. Ushuru mpaka sasa hivi tunavyozungumza, gunia la mpunga ni shilingi 5,000, la mchele 5,000, pumba laini shilingi 2,000 katika wilaya ya Malinyi. Na asilimia kubwa nafanya kazi na wakulima wa Malinyi. Kwa hiyo ni changamoto. Changamoto nyingine unaweza kukuta una wakulima wengi, dhamana yako haiwezi kutosha kuwahudumia hao wakulima. Kwa hiyo ni changamoto nayo kuweza kupata mtaji ili kuweza kukizi kuwahudumia hao wakulima. Yeah.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. Now I move to Esther. What are the challenges? I see the advisor taking notes. He's definitely ready to respond to some of the challenges you're facing. Karib.
Thank you so much. One of the approaches I would like to make in terms of the challenges would not only be personal to Farmer Lifeline, but since I've also been interacting with a number of innovators, both in Africa and beyond, but specifically from Africa. One of them is the products that they produce. I'll give an example. In the Generation Africa competitions, we have a lady who presses pumpkin seeds to produce oil. And she complains that this product is not pushed into her country's supermarkets as opposed to those that are being imported. So the question is it a question of policy, or is it that, there's that which is limiting government or, different stakeholders to allow even these young innovators to push their products into the local markets to begin with. Then number 2, I'll go to the place of unfair advantages when it comes to business registrations. You can come to a country like Kenya. We are advantaged, I can say that, when it comes to registering a business. It may take a very short time for me to register a business. I don't want to pinpoint a country in Africa. I don't know if there's someone from Angola. They could maybe attest to this. How long does it take to register a business in Angola for you to be working? You might find it's 2 months, yet me in Kenya, I registered a business, and in a week or 2, I'm starting operations. So these are 2 young innovators in 2 very different contexts, and they have to compete. And they will have to compete. But you find that maybe the market segment for this one is the same as this one, but the one already has an advantage over the other. So is it an issue of policy, lawmakers and the like, to look into such things? And number 3, I know it has been mentioned, but I think we cannot say it enough maybe as innovators on the place of financing. Just to make it clear, most of of innovators are looking for patient capital. It's patient capital. And that's why you'll find most of them looking for grant, because it will be patient with them. Most will not run to, especially the strict venture capitalists, because you'll find that maybe they're testing something on their product. They want to see how well it will fit into a certain market, and they will not have enough runway to pay back the investor. So what they will do, they will look for the patient, any patient financing, remembering that a loan from a bank will require collateral. So it's not even that much possible for a young innovator to walk into a bank and say, you know, my mom owns 15 acres of land, and I can place the title deed there. Some are even out of school. So I look at a country like Tunisia, and you find that you can actually be incubated by government, and they cater for your costs as you begin your business, so that you have enough capital for you to even test and iterate until you have a ready product to take into the market. So when it comes to financing, how can we make it better for the ecosystem? And lastly, by just a personal example, Generation Africa is actually at the forefront of this. Just like to echo that, I'm a product of Generation Africa. I was a winner of Go Getters last year, and by the time I'm recording this video, we had already moved to a new office. I started in a bed sitter. If those who understand what a bed sitter is, it's just a small piece, I don't know, it's a small space where you all fit as a team, but because you're a startup and you have a vision, you would rather start there than not start at all, until you get that person who believes in your dream to inspire and to finance you patiently for you to grow your product. So I would really like this three to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had said I'll become a shadow, but then I'm just going to become a bridge to that shadow. John, you've listened to both Dixon and Esther and the challenges that they've raised. And I think it's important when you're thinking about solving both issues that were raised by Dixon and Esther, what kind of like an ecosystem that we need to have in order to have a functioning food system. And that is where I would start, and I will go back into my shadow.
Thanks, Blandina. Of course, some of these issues are macro and they will require government intervention and related to policy. You know, just like the way we protect children under 5, and we are looking at under 5 mortality or infant mortality, governments need to create policies that protect startups. Tax-related policies either protects or incentivizes startups. For me, and I know in some countries, without mentioning, companies are required to pay tax at the point of registration of the company. You have not even made money. Why are you expected to pay tax? So we have to create, just like we are trying to incentivize big companies when they are coming into countries, we should also incentivize and protect small companies, and especially because we want to revolutionize agriculture in Africa. Companies that are interested, especially either technology or of takers like Dixon here, we have to find a way of protecting them at least for 5 years before you expose them to such things, number one. Number two, of course, about competitiveness of the products. I am not for protectionism. I'm not saying we should create tax environment, but we have to incentivize either the supermarkets or the companies. If you are producing something from, you know, and I know, as I've said, I belong I sit in the board of Serengeti Breweries, East African breweries. Governments have policies to attract beverages companies that are using local raw materials, which means we can also create policies where we incentivize either supermarkets or companies like yours. So there are policy issues, and I think it's possible. But number two, and specifically to, I've seen from Dixon's presentation, with the growth that you have, you cannot grow further without partnering. whether it is capital or expertise, you have to go beyond Mlimba, you have to go beyond Ulanga. So the challenge Dickson will have is how do you move it from a Dickson Lugala company, which is founder, owner, to an entity that is bigger than Dickson Lugala. So it means, for example, we already have a proof of concept that the business that you're doing makes money, is profitable business. You have to be able to attract other shareholders, you see, to come into your company. Of course, you have to reduce your stake. You probably not own. And I've seen many SMEs that are failing to grow because they are afraid of losing control. That I have to have 100% of my company. Now, 100% can be 100 million, good, but you can own 70%, but that can give you $1 billion. Your 70% share gives you, so that type of ownership. Number 3, to Esther, and I've been talking to startups like Esther's. Innovators are not good at everything. You're good at innovating a product. So also as you are creating, if you look at the Microsofts, if you look at the Apples, even at the beginning of their startups, they looked for partners. People coming in with money, so they don't have expertise, they cannot innovate, but they have resources. And I'm sure even in Kenya, there's also that thinking that if you are a startup and if you are to attract patient capital, it has to be capital from outside Africa. No, even within Africa, there is capital that can be invested in such companies. So you need 3 types. You need, within a company, somebody who is good at the product innovating. You need somebody with resources and patient. They're not in hurry in getting their money back. But also you need somebody who is either good in marketing or good in management. So you have to come as a package. The challenge I sometimes see, I'm not sure if it is happening with Esther, is one person wants to be everything. They want to be the investor, the innovator, the manager, the marketer, the head of finance, and that hinders growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Esther and Dickson nodding. Now this is your time to shoot some questions to John. Dickson, welcome. You can ask questions to John now.
Mimi nafikiri nimeelewa hata kila alichokizungumza, hata mimi nawaza hicho, kwa sababu inafika mahala kila kitu kufanya wewe ni ngumu.
That's a good one. Thank you so much, and you being generous.
Can I do this in Kiswahili for Dickson in a minute?
Okay.
Kwa sababu kwa bahati nzuri naitwa John Ulanga na natoka wilaya ya Ulanga. So nimekuja gundua kumbe anafanya kazi mpaka kwetu kule Ulanga na sehemu nyingine. Tafuta wawekezaji wengine. Wapo. Mmenisikia Dickson. Kuna watu, yani na isibaki kuwa, hata ulipoanza kuita Dickson Lugala Company niliogopa. Yani kwa sababu inabaki ni wewe. Manake bahati mbaya wewe ukifa na kampuni imefanyaje? Imekufa. Na kampuni yako ikifa, kuna wakulima 20,000 ambao watakosa pa kwenda kwa sababu walikuwa wanamtegemea mtu anaitwa Dickson Lugala. Kwa hiyo ukitafuta wawekezaji wengine, ukatengeneza na management, au ukatengeneza hata management wewe ukabaki tu kama mwekezaji, kampuni yako itakuwa. Tukikutana hapa baada ya miaka 3, trust me, utakuwa mkubwa sana.
Mimi naweza kusema toka mwaka jana niliongeza madirector. Mpaka sasa hivi tuna madirector 5.
This is a really good case. Thank you so much, Dickson. Okay, you started taking up steps. Esther, a question to John.
He's seated next to me, so you tend to be more friendly with him.
Don't look at him and his eyes.
Smile,
Don't. Just look at the audience, and then you can shoot your question.
Okay. I also had a question regarding these partnerships that can help us as innovators grow. For our products that we want to move to other countries. For example, I'm in Kenya. I want to begin, moving to the East African region. We know that there are trade treaties that do favor us. But unless I'm in such a high-level summit that I can hear at least a bit about them and maybe ask someone to break it down for me, I'm advantaged as Esther. But remember, there's a youth who doesn't know about this. Yes, I'll be an ambassador to the youth that I'll meet, but the majority have not yet been reached. Like for example, in Kenya, agriculture, the youth in agriculture are less than 20%, assuming that. And there is opportunity in agriculture, but they want to see how else can they scale also. Some have really viable businesses. But when they think about scaling, they have no information about it. As Esther, I don't have that manpower to talk about the policies that are favoring them as innovators. So how do these partnerships also get this information down to the young entrepreneur in a rural area or who is also in agribusiness?
Excellent question. There's always this myth that if you're in the rural area, you are disconnected. Not anymore. Nowadays, you are disconnected. I mean, you are connected from wherever you are. But number two, I think one thing that I think young innovators like yourselves, you have to do, and probably you're already doing, create coalitions. Big businesses are coming together in order to access information, to push for access to information. So what type of coalitions are you having? Because it is difficult, say, for the East African community or for a KEPSA to look for individual young innovators. But if you form, I saw Martin, I think I stepped out. But if you form, Martin, right here. If you form associations, fintech association, there you already have brought together, it means you have a means of communication amongst yourself. If any one of you gets access to information, that information can go across, you see? Or if you say, we are here, we need to be informed about rules and regulations of trading across the East African community. Somebody can come to you as a group. So for me, coalition building within and join coalitions. As I've said, I am the CEO of the Tanzania Private Sector Foundation. And we were in Uganda just last weekend, Munyonyo, for what is called the Business and Investment, East African Business and Investment Forum. I can tell you, probably only 10, 15% of the participants were young people. It's probably they did not have access to information. So form coalitions, demand, and of course use social networks to access as much information as possible. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the eyes of Dickson and Esther, and I'm wondering, John has just answered your questions, and it feels like, yay, everything is merry and beautiful. Tomorrow we are all scaling up. That's going to be easy, and we're all going to retain the talents that we've just attracted. And nobody in our teams, in the new directors that Dickson just told us, are going to form their own companies. No, we're all going to collaborate. Is that what's going to happen? Is that what, John, you're saying? I think it will be interesting to hear a little bit more along those lines. You know, what are the kind of things that you can really do to make sure, even when you're expanding, the kind of talent that you're actually attracting is not is balanced. Let me put it, it's balanced. Because you kept on saying you cannot wear all those hats, you cannot do all those things, but then importantly, what should Dickson and Esther really do in order to expand or scale up in a very balanced way? John.
First, you have to make a decision. Do you want to grow? Do you want to remain the same? If you have to grow, skills mix is, that's the basic thing you have to do, skills mix. In terms of, in order for a company to grow, there are a set of skills that you need. There is that product innovation that is unique, that can be patented, product innovation. But there are what are known as general skills, probably not the most expensive, but extremely important, you see? Now, These are available and can be bought, can be trained. So I'm not saying all will remain, all will be loyal. There's always going to be attrition. But for founder CEOs, the challenge they do have is the worry that if I invite people, they learn the trade, they're going to, I think Marianne was saying, one of the founders was formerly somebody from Syngenta. But they moved out, formed the company, and Syngenta is going on. So as part, one of the price you pay for growing is the risk of somebody copycatting. Yeah. But that's life. Yeah. You see, now if you want to remain to be protective, I usually say any species that is just inbreeding will be extinct. So you'll always have to invite new breeds of people with new thinking who are going to challenge you. You see, and that's the only way you're going to grow. Now, if growth means multiplication, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Esther, thanks.
To respond to that, I do agree that we cannot have a founder for the entire lifetime of this business. And we are 2 years old. I'm not trying to justify. Yeah, we are 2 years old, and you're the one who has the dream. So that's where we start, as founder and CEO. And then as you grow, you have to bring in more talent. I think that's where I was going with that point. Like, we do have a board of advisors as Farmer Lifeline. We do also have a board of management. That ensures that decisions are not made by one person. And in case of those risky decisions that need to be made, it's not Esther who is making it, but Farmer Lifeline as a company.
Okay, really, really good. John, before you
destined for greatness.
Ooh, Esther, you're going to sleep well tonight. Oh yeah, really good. Dixon, let me karibu.
Asante. Mimi nilikuwa nataka kuzungumzia kitu kimoja tu sasa kwa ajili ya kumalizia. Leo tunazungumzia kukuza kilimo Afrika na kuweza kuzalisha. Hapa kwetu Tanzania kuna nani inayoitwa ruzuku. Na tafsiri ruzuku na maana ya ruzuku kwa wakulima sielewi. Tunapozungumzia ruzuku, package ya ruzuku siyo. Leo unampa mkulima mbolea, lakini mbegu anatumia loko. Imagine pale anazalisha au anaenda anazalisha kitu gani? Kwa sababu tunapozungumzia ruzuku, maanake tunataka mapato ili kuzalisha kilimo cha kibiashara kiweze kusimama. Sasa hapo sioni kama kuna kilimo cha kibiashara. Leo tunazungumzia ruzuku, unampa mbolea peke yake, lakini mbegu anatumia loko. Na hata viuatilifu ananunua gari. Sasa sioni hapo umemsaidia. Kwa hiyo tukizungumzia ruzuku, tuzungumzie package ya ruzuku.
Sawa sawa.
Ni hayo ya kusema, lakini kingine nilikuwa nasema hapa sisi tunakuaga na maneno mengi sana. Unaweza kukutana na watu wa benki wakakwambia tuna fursa ABC.
Bankers, please raise your hands. You're being noticed.
Lakini leo unaweza kuwafuata na kuzungumzia kile ambacho walikuwa wanakisema. Wanakuambia huu mpango upo lakini bado haujaanza. Sasa tunapozungumzia natolea mfano kama CRDB wana hela za green, lakini leo ukienda hawajatoa hata sehemu moja Tanzania. Sasa tuzube hizo hela zipo kwa ajili ya kukopesha watu gani? Maanake tunapozungumzia green ya kilimo na wakulima. Sasa hivyo vitu mimi ndio vinanichanganya, kwa sababu unakuta kabisa uko tayari hata kuingia gharama ya lile andiko kuliandika. Lakini ukienda benki wanakuambia huu mchakato upo lakini bado hauja. Sasa hiyo nayo nasema kwenye kisera tukae vizuri. Okay. Sio tu kuweka majukwaani na kusema kuna pesa lakini hela hamna.
That's a really good point. I think you're referring to quite a number of boards when we hear them. It's good, okay. You're raising a really good point, Dixon, quite a number of times. Sometimes, and I'm looking at the hashtag lady. Is she still? Lucy? Okay, she's gone. She raised a really good point because she was saying sometimes we're trying to mobilize people, but what are we really mobilizing? Are we mobilizing the awareness to the process that is about to commence, or are we really raising awareness into investment that is readily available for innovators and producers that want to utilize it? So I think that's really a good point, Dixon, you're leaving us to ponder. Now, I'm looking at my watch. Time is not really on our side, but then I'm going to encourage you to leave us with a message that we should all think about. I'm going to go back to Dixon. Kama kuna neno la kutuaga nalo, kindly go ahead, and then to John. No, then to Esther, and then John. Dixon, cut you for final words.
Mimi nashukuru sana kwa kongamano hili. Tumejifunza mengi na tutaendelea kujifunza. Lakini kikubwa kama alivyosema dada alopita pale akasema sasa tunaenda kusema mimi tu yanaweza kafika au tunaondoka kwa mpango gani ambao tutaondoka utakuwa jumuishi kwa pamoja. Ni hayo tu. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Dixon. Esther?
Thank you. I think for my closing remark is to say that Africa has the youngest population in the world. And we need to think about investing in this young generation, especially in agribusiness. Because if we inspire and if we invest in this population, then what we're talking about, food security, is not something we are going to be worried about in future. I want to think about Uganda. More than 50% of them are youth in farming, but that's not the same case in all African countries. So what can we borrow from such countries as Uganda for food security also moving forward? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of quick points. One, I would agree with what you said. If you're a startup, you're in the first 2-3 years, much as I also belong to a bank, but don't go to the bank. Absolutely. I think it's going to be suicidal if you go to a bank if you're in your startup. So I think the challenge you have and especially in our continent, is how do we create appetite for individuals with excess resources to invest and trust startups? And I think there is an opportunity there. Number two, our efforts in Africa to reduce poverty have not been that successful because we have not been able to revolutionize agriculture, which occupies majority of our people. If you look at other countries that have gone through that poverty barrier up, the first and foremost thing they did was agrarian revolution. And with technology and risk-taking individuals, we have the likes of Dixon, the likes of Esther. I think we can get there if we support them. So we need to support them. Dixon also requires practical solutions. Yesterday we had a workshop as part of this, which we talked about the importance of using fertilizers and improved seeds. And according to projections, if that program is to be implemented, production of food in Tanzania is going to double by the year 2030. Now, for me, that looks like almost a Marshall Plan. Doubling food production in about 7 years is huge, but it's possible. But to conclude, for Esther, but also for Dixon, they need to be handheld. They need to be supported. Their growth and success should not be accidental. There has to be purposeful efforts, either by governments or maybe by private sector institutions like ours, to follow through, advise them. Because I am sure with proper advice, Dixon can move from covering 20,000 farmers to 200,000 farmers in less than 5 years. Thanks.
Really, a round of applause to our panelists. I thank you so much for opening it up. In as much as I don't know why you came here, you came because of the title or you came because of the names you saw, but I'm hoping you're coming here felt like you gained something. For me, I've learned a lot from both Lucia, Mariana, but also Esther and Dixon, and importantly from BBC, Eric and John. You're also BBC, okay, and John is also calling himself a BBC. But really, I'd like to thank Robin and its team for putting this up. Really a good session of learning. Importantly, I think sometimes when you think of technology, Lissy was really good. It was like, yeah, you use all those hashtags with all these singers, but we're not doing that with Kilimo. In Tanzania, sometimes we say, hey, you should not become Kulima wa WhatsApp, where you get a lot from farming watermelon and what have you, and you all jump into it. There isn't much. We've heard from Dixon. He's doing very well. And I hope all of us not only understand when we're thinking about the use of technology, and it's coming in a very strong voice, it should not be cherry picking. We need to think about the entire value chain, from the different creations of the inputs, from the different methods that we can use in production, to logistics, all the way to storage, and also managing post-harvest losses. And then Marianne, importantly, insisted on making sure the standards are met at all those levels, at the different levels of the nodes of the value chain. Because if you don't have good seeds, whatever Dixon is doing is not possible. He's not going to harvest anything anyway. So really, and then at the end of the day, if you're thinking about youth, in as much as they're young, we need to create trust. We need to have patient finance, okay? We also have to come up with practical solutions and not just become famous in these big gatherings where we talk. So really, I would like to thank you all for coming this evening. We really appreciate. We have more fascinating sessions coming up